My name is Ellen Reed. I'm a New Hampshire State Representative. I represent Rockinghamton, which is Newmarket and Newfields. And I became, last week, the first representative in New Hampshire history to be banned from the House chamber. I was banned from the House chamber because during one of my bill hearings, where I was not in the room, I was in the hallway, a miscarriage of the fair legislative process was happening inside, and I was watching it on my phone, and I was not taking it quietly, and I said the F word. Now, the F word gets said all the time, of course. We're all adults, and this is a very high conflict, contentious environment for all of us to be working in. A lot worse than the F word gets said, as a matter of fact. But this bill was very special. This bill was simply informing survivors of their already existing legal rights to, including to an evidence kit, what we call a rape kit. And for some reason, this has been incredibly contentious for the last 3 years. And apparently, as part of this entire process, in order to squash me, I became the first member banned, and the ostensible reason is because I said a potty word. Now, the speaker actually doesn't have a right to ban a member from the chamber, even on off-session days. Not only is it my workspace, it's actually probably why he chose to ban me, because it is well known, since we don't have offices as state reps, that I use the ante room as my office Monday through Friday. But I wasn't under House rules at the time. The speaker only has authority to enforce House rules because I wasn't engaged in any House business, no committee room or hearing or chamber. I wasn't under House rules. What he cited as the violation that he was enforcing was a criminal statute of disorderly conduct. So I guess the speaker is claiming that he has the authority to criminally charge me and, without any due process, sentence me to not being in my workspace as a duly elected representative. This is unprecedented. It's never happened. And also, for the record, I didn't even so much as have law enforcement or even protective services come up and speak to me because I said the F word. The most that happened was the sergeant at arms, who has no actual security authority in the hallway at all, came out and said, "Hey, I understand why you're upset, but can you just keep it down?" And I said, "Okay," and that's all that happened. And the video shows that. But the speaker has determined in his infinite power that he is going to charge me with a crime, even though I was not criminally charged, I was not convicted, and carry out punishment. The other problem with his enforcing a ban that's never been done before is the fact that he hasn't done it before. Part of our House rules is that we have to keep with past custom, usage, and precedent. Where our rules are silent, what we've always done becomes the rule, and that is in our rules. And even though we've had members call for a genocide on other members just this year, even though the speaker himself has called a sitting member while he was presiding over the House a B word. And that's worth thinking about, because it always does seem to be targeted towards women. Even though we've had all manner of terrible things said and done, both while doing House business and while not doing House business, the speaker has not banned any of those people, certainly not his own party, and certainly not men. I mean, this goes way back to my first term in 2017, where one of the male Republican representatives was found to be giving online advice to intended rapists. And in response to our demanding that he be somehow censured the Republicans, and I believe our current speaker was there at the time, insisted on putting a female Democratic member into the same ethics process because she had used the F word on social media. And during those hearings, I pointed out, without saying C word, that I said the actual quote. A Republican representative had a quote in his social media calling her a C word outright. And I quoted it. But apparently, woman says the bad word, bad. Man calls woman an even worse bad word, cool. Woman then quotes man saying the bad word, how dare I? I got gavelled. So this is a long history of impartial, or rather not impartial, carrying out and enforcement of rules. And obviously at this point it's rules by fiat, what the speaker determines to be proper or improper, and nothing to do with our actual rules. So for all those reasons, that, and I am a duly elected representative with the right to my workspace, not just the constitutional right, but actually the duty to represent my constituents, this ban is illegitimate. So what is HB 1633 all about? So 4 years ago, I was working a job. I've been a rep for 10 years, but we don't get paid, so I have to work jobs. And I'm a CDL driver, actually, among other things. And I was at a work party. I prepared a drink for myself. I drank one drink at the party that I prepared for myself. I had some food. It was over a few hours. And then I looked back down, and the drink I'd already drank was completely full again. And I looked across the table to one of my coworkers and said, "Did you do this?" He had slid an identical drink in front of me without me asking, without letting me know he was doing it. And he kind of looked sheepish and was like, eh. And I trusted him because he was my coworker. We had talked about music lyrics, and he talked about his kids. And I got about a quarter of the way through the drink, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up, pulling my hand away from him because he's massaging it. And the other guys that were in the room, it's a male-dominated field, there were only guys there, were gone. And it was just me and him. And as I sat up, I got nauseated, and I've never passed out drinking, ever. Not ever, certainly not after 1 1/4 drinks. And I felt like throwing up, so I stood up to leave. He grabbed me by the arm. He yanked me back into the room. And at first he wouldn't let me leave, but when it was clear that I was throwing up, he followed me into the single stall bathroom. And as I couldn't even make it to the toilet, I just got to the sink. And as I was vomiting in the sink, he started groping me, and he said, "Don't worry about vomiting, puking. It's fine. I'm just paying attention to your ass." I locked him out of, when I got to a stopping point in my vomiting, I locked him out of the bathroom, and I was in there for a long time, and I didn't hear anything, and I thought that he was gone. And I opened the door. He was blocking the door. He had waited probably like 15 minutes. And the only thing I could think of was to get him out of my way. So I asked him to bring me my phone. And when he went into the kitchen to get my phone, I ran to the room. It's a bunkhouse situation. I ran to the room that I was staying in and locked myself in. And the next morning, I called my husband to take me to the hospital to get tested for drugging. Sorry. So I went to the hospital, and I demanded to be tested. And the doctor said that because I had basically successfully gotten away and was not penetrated, and rape is penetration, that I didn't deserve a rape kit. And I fought. And, you know, I have a master's degree. At that point, I had been a state rep for 6 years, and already quite well known for being an advocate and a loudmouth and, you know, a fighter. And I fought, and I still couldn't get anything. I got a social worker called in to calm me down, but I could not get any evidence on my assault. I found out later, because I started perusing the RSAs and how it was possible that I was denied this. I found out that we had long since passed a Survivor's Bill of Rights. And in that Bill of Rights, in law, anyone who is a victim of assault has a right to a state evidence kit, which includes the toxicology that would have proven I was drugged. And I was trying to make sense of the whole thing, and I thought, well, it sucks it happened, but at least it happened to someone who can do something about it. Not only am I in position, but I am the kind of person who can fight this. And I was only peripherally aware of this organization called the Coalition at the time, but I knew that they were the experts in the field of all things sexual assault. Like any good little Democrat, I thought that they were the good guys. So I called them up and I said, hey, this awful thing happened to me, but aren't you glad? Because now I get to fix the thing that's broken. And it was such a weird Zoom call. There was a moment of silence and then a little bit of humming and hawing. And then after about 30 seconds, the public affairs director got really serious with me and said, we wrote the system the way it is, and we think it's working perfectly. I'm like, I'm living proof right here. So then I called the victim advocate at the DOJ, who over 2 hour-long phone calls confirmed that this was not just a me thing, but was in fact an epidemic. She called it an epidemic of doctors who didn't know. Now they send the hospitals a 128-page document from the AG's office explaining the rights, explaining how to do a rape kit, all of that. But what ER doctor reads a 128-page document from the AG's office? These are doctors. They're not lawyers. And so I went back to the Coalition. I said, hey, this is a problem. People are falling through the cracks. It's confirmed. And I'm going to put a bill in either way. You can either write it or not, but I'm putting a bill in. And that was the last meaningful conversation that I ever had with them. I put in the bill. All the bill said is that a doctor had to inform a victim of their rights. And they showed up and they said that it was in the context of my personal story, that victims like me who had been drugged and sexually assaulted, groped, chased, yanked, all of that, but not penetrated, did not deserve an evidence kit. And these are the heroes of all things sexual assault related in the whole state. They're the monopoly. You cannot go to any hotline, any advocate, anyone in the state related to sexual assault or domestic violence for that matter, and have them not be part of this organization. And I'm not blaming all the people on the ground, all the member organizations that make up or members of the overarching organization. Those people got into it for the right reasons, but this umbrella that's taking all the money and denying all the care, that organization is a problem. And I couldn't believe my ears. I was jumping out of my skin that this organization, the good guys, would sit there and literally say they didn't think all victims should have what the victims already have in law, which is a right to that evidence. I mean, we have a hard enough time having victims believed as it is, right? Like that's the one crime where victims aren't believed. If someone steals your stuff, if someone, anything, you're believed. But if you're sexually assaulted, that's the first question in everybody's mind. Didn't you really want it? Weren't you drunk? What were you wearing? And we know this, it's a trope. We know that this is the most under-prosecuted crime that there is. And they are actively fighting against collecting evidence on all the crimes that are currently not getting evidence. The DOJ themselves said that while between 275 to 500 rape kits go out every year, there's another 1,000 people who walk into a hospital, say that they were sexually assaulted, and would want evidence, but no one tells them that they have a right to it, just like me. So they opposed it. It passed the House unanimously. And then in the Senate, because the Senate is far more responsive to their lobbying that they're not actually legally allowed to do. I'll get to that. The Senate passed a non-germane amendment without a non-germane hearing, as they should, that basically got rid of all the survivor notification and was just a simple power grab. It replaced the Office of Victim Advocate citation in the law with the coalition themselves, so that they would be in charge of literally everything. And that version got indefinitely postponed, which is to say killed with fire in the Senate. So I put in this version, HB 1633. And they fought me. They were neutral in the House, but not really, right? They were officially neutral. But they had gotten, so the coalition is really part of the DOJ. You have to think of them as a massive government contractor. They receive 98% of their revenue is federal and state funds, basically all public funds for government function. These are things like training police officers, collecting evidence, maintaining the sex offender registry. They're doing government function with government money, but they don't claim that they are beholden to any of the transparency laws or constitutional duties that the government entity would be. And so they effectively are an arm of the DOJ that has none of the accountability and transparency that the DOJ has to live up to. They work very, very closely with prosecutors across the state. So they asked the DOJ to put on a fiscal note. And a fiscal note for legislation is basically some government agency saying this bill is going to cost a lot of money. And in this fiscal note, the DOJ admits that there are 1,000 people a year who walk into a hospital, say that they were sexually assaulted, would want a rape kit to collect that evidence, but are not getting it because no one's telling them what their actual legal existing rights are, the rights that are already in law. So I was in the hallway listening to the coalition badmouth this bill and say crazy things like I was narrowing the definition of sexual assault victim. It's not what the bill does at all. Or that I was allowing victims to go home from the hospital with their own rape kit. And there's no good faith reading of the bill that renders that interpretation. They are trying to exploit existing vague language in the Survivors' Bill of Rights. That's already law. That's RSA 21M18. That's already law. And they're trying to say, well, the existing law has vague language that you could, if you're like in crazy land, trying to interpret in this wild way to say that people could go home with their rape kit. But I, in my bill, am just saying whatever the law says, that's what we put in victims' hands at the hospital. That these are your rights as they exist in law. And the through line through all of their arguments, because their arguments have changed over and over, their through line is that they want gatekeepers. They want someone to gatekeep. In the first bill, they said that not all victims deserve to have evidence collected, even though that's our law says the opposite. They also couldn't define sexual assault, oddly enough. But they also had people saying that we didn't have enough refrigerators for the rape kits. And also that if they collected some of these evidence kits, that some of them would either not generate evidence or be exculpatory, and that would hurt their case. Which kind of maybe tips their hand a little bit with their real intentions and their real priorities, which are not helping victims. So the 500 kits that go out, there's another 1,000. There's 3 times the number of assaults happening than what's being addressed. And they intentionally want, in their words, either a medical professional or one of the SANE nurses they train to gatekeep who gets that evidence and who doesn't. Medical professionals are not lawyers. They're not law enforcement. They don't know what the person's rights are. And that's what my bill was trying to fix. Because in the process of handing someone a card that says what their legal rights are, guess what? The doctor sees that. And then the doctor knows that he or she cannot deny an evidence kit. So as I was pacing back and forth, and you can see it in the security footage, and watching the hearing that was happening on the other side of the wall, there was only one person in the hallway, and that's a lobbyist who was sitting, and I wasn't talking to her. I didn't say fuck to anybody. I was kind of shouting it at the heavens. But that lobbyist happens to be Jody Grimbalist. And she is known as someone who has taken, and I mean, not just known, it's documented, someone who's taken thousands and thousands of dollars from the coalition. And she has the dubious distinction of being the only of those lobbyists that have taken thousands and thousands of dollars, because there's a lot of them, that actually reported what she did with the money. So I did a 91A, and I asked the Secretary of State's office to give me all the lobbying reports for everyone who has received money from the coalition. And most of them would say 17,000, 10,000, whatever. And all of this is problematic for a reason I'll get to in a minute. But hers alone had an addendum attached to it that said what she did with the money. And what she did with the money was distribute it to all of the senators who happened to be the same senators who supported their flagship bill, Marsy's Law, for their political campaigns. Now, this is super problematic because the coalition is a 501c3 tax-exempt charity. There are two ways in which this is a problem. First of all, 501c3s, if they want to remain tax-exempt, cannot donate to political campaigns in any way, shape, or form. They cannot get involved in electioneering at all. There's some more tenuous connections that can be made with electioneering with regard to the public affairs director of the coalition being married to the politics director of WMUR, and then also using that position to help other people's campaigns. She's very well connected with big Democratic names. Again, I'm a Democrat and I'm to the left of Democrats, but this looks bad. But very specifically, a 501c3 cannot do any kind of electioneering at all. And this was Jody Grimbalist putting in a report with the Secretary of State's office saying she received X amount of thousands of dollars from the coalition, and with that, she distributed it among political campaigns, mostly to senators that had voted for the coalition's desired bill, priority bill, Marsy's Law. The other problem with the lobbying in general is that the average lobbyist gets, in New Hampshire, gets about $80,000 a year. There are, depending on the year, between 5 to 7 registered lobbyists for the coalition. Most of these people do lobbying in addition to some other function, so it's not 100% of their income. There is one dedicated lobbyist, but a 501c3, once again, cannot spend more than 5% of its eligible donations on lobbying. Now, the coalition gets about $10 million in public funds. All of that is exempt. They cannot use it to calculate at all. They get about $200,000 a year in private donations that are eligible. So only 5% of that can be spent on lobbying. And with that 5%, they have 5 to 7 registered lobbyists. They usually have 2. If you look at the video footage of almost all the bills they've lobbied on, they usually have 2 of their lobbyists go up on any one particular bill. But it's not just hearing testimony. This is every email, every Zoom, every phone call, every parking lot, every hallway conversation. All of it is lobbying. Anytime an employee of an organization speaks to a legislator about an active piece of legislation, that is lobbying. And they have multiple employees come and lobby on bills that aren't even registered, but not even including the ones that are not registered. They have 5 to 7 registered. They lobby by their own website on 150 bills a year. And anyone who's on criminal justice or on child and family law committee or in judiciary, all of these committees that they show up regularly to, we all know that they have at least one lobbyist, usually 2 there every single day we're in committee. So at least 3 days a week. How is an organization lobbying on 150 bills, not just in testimony, but all the emails and calls and Zooms and parking lot conversations with 5 to 7 registered lobbyists, plus other ones that are not registered, on $11,000 a year? In addition to that, direct lobbying, they also pay thousands of dollars to lobbying firms like Jody Grimbalis. And they say that they have to, by law, report that they received money from the coalition. But they don't usually say what they did with the money. So we don't know for sure. They're a lobbying entity, but we don't know that they lobbied for sure. But Jody said exactly what she did with the money. So I met with the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee the day after the hearing, and he told me that the coalition had lobbied heavily all the members of the committee like they did the last time, and that they had told him, and they all believed them, that the bill allowed people to take rape kits home, that the bill allowed all these other problems, when all the bill is just putting the Survivor's Bill of Rights in law in front of victims. And so he promised me he would do the right thing, and that he would get information and talk to me, and then within a week he voted to kill it. And so now it's going to be on the floor in Senate Judiciary to kill. And what I really need is everyone who cares about having victims, that other 1,000 that never get told what a rape kit is or that they have a right to one. If you care about that, you need to let the senators know that these political games are bullshit. You need to let them know that they need to actually support doing the right thing and not whatever their political donors are telling them to do. In fact, one of the coalition lobbyists, who I don't even think is a registered lobbyist, testified that we don't need to inform victims of their right to a rape kit because the list of their rights is on a card inside the rape kit that they don't know that they have a right to. And one of the other rights in the Survivor's Bill of Rights is the right to be informed of these rights. It's already in law. All HB 1633 does is fulfill the law, because we say you have a right to a kit, you have a right to be informed that you have a right to a kit. That's in law. RSA 21M18, that's law. But there's no law requiring that the doctors even know that. And there's certainly no law requiring that the doctors or police officers tell victims that. And all I'm doing is closing the gap. I need everyone, if you care about those 1,000 people who show up to hospitals saying that they were assaulted, if you care about those people just even knowing that they have a right to a kit, I need you to contact your senator before Thursday to let them know that the kill motion, the interim study motion on this bill is not acceptable, and that they need to be doing what the right thing is, what the obvious thing is, and not what their donors are telling them to do.